Hi, everyone. How are you? Mrs. Canlis, where are you? I got 2 curse words. Just two. Earmuffs. First of all, quick thank you, Brian, Anthony, Will Gadara, the whole Welcome Conference team for putting on this amazing event and inviting me here today. You know, Will asked me at what point if I had a preference of where I wanted to speak today. And I just told him I'd rather not go first and I'd rather not follow Seth Meyers. So, this is perfect. So, I have a theory about Will Gadara, that one of the reasons he's so successful at giving great hospitality so consistently is that Will is really successful at being happy consistently. Makes sense, right? I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know Will that well. He could be a miserable jerk in his downtime that kicks dogs and small children when people aren't looking. I don't think so, though. He seems pretty legitimately joyous about his endeavors, and I think that joy gets transferred to his guests. Never have I come to grips so much with the correlation between my own personal happiness and the ability to do my job than on a trip I took to New York this past November. I ran into Will, and he's just electric. They had just reopened 11 Madison Park, and he's beaming with pride and excitement. But I'm going to be completely honest with you. I was in such a bad headspace that I found his unbelievable positive energy completely fucking annoying. Because I was annoyed with everything at that point. I was most annoyed that at a time in my life when everything was so good, at least from the outside looking in, that I was completely upside down. Amazing wife, 3 beautiful kids, a thriving company, good health, and a lot of friends. I mean, boo fricking who, right? Even hearing myself say out loud that I was suffering from depression and anxiety made me want to punch myself in the face. But something about 2017 had kicked me into some sort of joyless submission. We had our hands up a lot in 2017, and although we say no to hundreds of projects, we still said yes to 5. That's 5 openings in 16 months, which is crazy. And because bad luck has no sense of timing, one of our existing restaurants burned down. And just so I could really screw things up, I decided to move at the same time. Add to that the tragic loss of a couple of friends, and I was dizzy as hell, but I couldn't get off the ride. So we're at 11 Madison Park, and Will tells me the theme for this year: restoration. I thought, perfect for Will and Daniel. They just demolished their jewel at the height of its glory and then restored it. How cool, right? But what does it mean to a guy who's in dire need of being restored himself? I don't know about you, but when I'm in a bad state, I listen to everything, waiting for that one line or piece of advice that's going to turn it all around. Could be Oprah, could be the barista, could be something my 4-year-old says. It could be something Patrick Swayze says in Roadhouse. I don't know. It comes in weird places sometimes. So I'm in a cab leaving New York, and the radio's on, and Rich Eisen is interviewing Kevin Costner. And he's asking the typical movie star questions. Who's the biggest star you ever worked with? Sean Connery. Who's the best actor you ever worked with? And Costner said, that's easy, Gene Hackman. And he goes on to tell a story about working with Hackman on No Way Out. Great movie, by the way. Costner got into a disagreement with the director about where they were going to shoot a scene. Up to that point, every single scene with Hackman had been Costner at a desk and Hackman across from him. And Costner said, we're not shooting again right here, we're shooting over there. And the director said, no, we're not, we're shooting it here. And Costner says, no, we're shooting it over there. It explodes into a massive argument. And at one point, Costner realizes that Hackman is watching them argue, but not engaging. And the director at one point says, hey, Kevin, do you think we should consult Gene Hackman about this? I mean, he's in the scene too. And Costner very brazenly said, Gene's pretty frickin' good. He'll figure it out. So at the end of the day, Costner's walking out into the lot, and Hackman's sitting on the hood of his car. And Hackman said, you, come here. And Costner says, crap. I disrespected this legendary actor, and he's going to let me have it. It's not what happened. Hackman told him that the last couple of years had been really brutal and that he was getting a divorce and that mentally he wasn't on his game, which led him to make questionable movie choices, and that hadn't allowed him to fight for things he thought were right. He told Koster that watching him made him remember why he wanted to be an actor in the first place. And he jumped in his car and he drove off. So I'm in the cab listening, and I actually get a little bit angry because I'm in Hackman's same headspace. And my initial thought actually was, I go, that's when Hackman made that terrible movie with Dan Aykroyd. Which it was. Loose Cannons, is that the name of it, Loose Cannons? And I thought to myself, I don't want to be Loose Cannons Gene Hackman, I want to be Royal Tenenbaums Hackman, or Hoosiers Hackman, or French Connection Hackman. So for perspective, my loose cannon headspace was somewhat justified. We'd just taken on the most difficult opening we'd ever encountered. 200-seat restaurant with breakfast, brunch, lunch, dinner, 24-hour room service, feed the hotel staff 4 times a day, rooftop bar, pool, 120-person banquet room, 3 meeting rooms. Your basic nightmare. Its opening coincided with labor shortage problem in Chicago, and the management team we put together, good people, but let's just say it was a chemistry set gone wrong. All openings have problems. This one just had it coming from all angles because this place had so many damn angles. And here we were in the eye of the hurricane of the opening, and I'm speaking at a tech show in New York, and sadly happy to be away from it, not exactly the person I wanted to be, and not exactly the person I needed to be. I took my hours in the air as respite from everything, and prayed by the time I landed it would get better. But as things do, before things get better, it would get worse. I landed back at home, and my first phone call off the plane was from one of our executives, who's here today. And she gave me some hard truth, and she didn't sugarcoat it. That in my own self-absorption, I wasn't even thinking about what the surge of 2017 had done to our own team. Our team was beat up, burned out, and pissed off. It was a good old-fashioned lecture, and it gave me some new and disturbing perspective. See, when you start out in this business, you know that the restaurant itself is a symphony, right? And all the parts are equally important. But when you're making big decisions, macro decisions, what restaurant to open and how much to spend and where to put it, for Rob and I, it had always been Hall & Oates. You start conducting and tell everyone to keep up. But this past year, everyone was playing so fast, we were breaking strings. So as it turns out, not only am I depressed, but maybe I'm being a bit of a self-consumed jerk too. That's the thing when you're moving this fast, everything in your periphery is a blur. Ironically, Eater posted an article that day about possible headlines for 2018. Boca Group swears they opened another restaurant, but can't remember where. Pretty good. Another said, Boca Group only opens 2 restaurants, slight fatigue. It was funny, but it wasn't that funny. Rob, nobody at my company was laughing. Rob, my business partner, and I knew it was imperative. We have some difficult conversations with people who need to be talked off the ledge, propped up, or just listened to. Having difficult conversations is a huge part of what I've done for almost 27 years. I walked headfirst into some nasty environments, and I was good at it. Table dragging 70 minutes, let me talk to him. We almost killed the guy at table 32 by serving him nuts, send me in. But right now, me talking my team off the ledge while I'm on the ledge, this was not going to be me at my rah-rah best. I did some active listening, I made some profuse apologies for the breakneck pace, made clear how much we appreciated them, but the final piece, the piece they needed, the action part, wasn't so simple. I had to explain we were in the middle of it, still just 8 weeks into a difficult opening, another opening that was just a few weeks away. So there are only Band-Aid solutions. A few days off here for Aaron and Jamie, motivational chat with Ian and Abby, some tears, some hugs, and for me and Rob, grinded out another opening. The funny thing is, restaurant openings had always been the thing that had restored me. I mean, the last time I was this anxious and depressed was when I dropped out of college. I mean, don't get me wrong, college was fun, but it had been kind of an empty experience for me. I'd surrounded myself by roommates at college who in some cases had such a bright light around them that I felt pretty lonely standing in their shadow. One of them, an aeronautical engineering major, told me he was going to be an astronaut when I first met him. I said, yeah, good luck with that, Mike. He, by the way, was the last American astronaut in space. And my writer friend Dave, who was the editor of the Daily Illini, would later become a finalist for the Pulitzer and wrote a couple Tom Hanks movies. These guys were doing or studying for exactly what they wanted to do in life and excelling at it. I wasn't emotionally connected to anything I was studying, and I wasn't getting closer to what I actually wanted to do, which was open up a restaurant by studying political science in the University of Illinois. I was insanely jealous they were moving towards something while I was standing still. So I concocted a plan written on a spiral notebook in 1991, which said the following. In block letters, enough. Drive to Florida, work in 2 restaurants, live off one, save everything from the other, learn all I can, eventually have enough money to open a place. The day I left school, my friend Mike pleaded with me as I was pulling out of the parking lot not to go. He told me this was a bad impulse decision and bound to screw my life up. Mike likes to tell this story when he comes in the restaurants and claims that I dramatically lowered my sunglasses and dropped some Shaw. Mike, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. I'm that unreasonable man. Later, Mike. He says I then squealed my tires and peeled out. I love that story so much because it makes me sound like such a badass. I was far from a badass, for the record. I remember only that it took me about 20 miles due south on the highway to feel like a new person, though. Emotional connectivity and a short-term goal would be the essential recipe for my life. The trip, though, at least initially, total disaster. Ended up in Panama City Beach, couldn't get hired at a restaurant, so I had to work at a terrible amusement park between listening to Margaritaville about 72 times a day and try not to step and puke at Kids Kingdom. I kept applying at restaurants. I moved in with a guy who I caught stealing from me, got in a wicked fistfight with him, was forced to move out. I spent a night sleeping on the beach and then a week living at a boarding house before finding a decent place to live. And worst of all, a bobcat, who somebody was illegally keeping as a pet, escaped from their house, ran into mine, and attacked me. It sounds like I made that up. I did not. I was attacked by a ferocious bobcat. It was incredibly scary. I was asking the universe if I could open a restaurant, and I was pretty sure it was telling me no. Want to know the amazing thing? None of it depressed me. I was living my own choose-your-own adventure every day. Some turns were good, some turns were bad, but none of it was boring, and my goal and my focus were singular and clear. One short-term goal at a time, things got better. And once I'd crafted a fake resume with restaurants that had all mysteriously gone out of business, so they couldn't call for a reference, I finally got a job. The 2.5 years in Panama City is a bit of a blur. I worked, I learned, I slept, and I saved. And one day in 1992, I found a little idyllic town called Seaside. It was 50 miles west of where I lived. And on the first night I drove out there, I took my girlfriend to this little restaurant called Josephines. It was small, pretty, and romantic, which is kind of what I was looking for. But upon entering the restaurant, I noticed that the only open table, my table, was sitting next to a group that were far from the ideal neighbors, drunk, loud, and massive fans of their own jokes. The maitre d', a charming fellow named Bruce Albert, winked at me as he handed me the menu. Inside the menu, there was a taped note. Welcome, Mr. Boehm. The guy on your left is an asshole. He will be gone soon. Until then, bear with us. Love, Bruce. I was instantly charmed by the entire little town. After dinner, people gathered on the town square. I asked what was going on, and they explained as soon as the sun went down, the movie would start. We sat, we drank wine, and we watched Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I loved everything about it. My only fear leaving that night is that somehow I'd entered some other dimension, like the Willoughby episode of Twilight Zone, and that if I left, I may never find my way back. But I did find my way back there, and I opened a little 6-table restaurant there, which is some 25 years ago. It was called the Lazy Days Cafe, and I cut my teeth at a tiny little 2-person operation where we did everything. After the oven blew up in my face on day 3 and caught my hair on fire, things seemed to get easier. This is how it all began, and one goal would always lead to another, and I found myself opening and selling restaurants and moving closer to my ultimate destination, from Seaside to Springfield to Nashville. I loved it, but every town I'd been in so far had been missing something. Some piece of the puzzle, and then came Chicago. It had everything I wanted. An amazing audience of consumers who loved food and appreciated great hospitality, serious professionals in front and back of the house, and for me, a great partner who complemented my skill sets. Fortunately, Chicago would say yes to us, and Rob and I both said yes to Chicago often. And let me tell you, you don't get to 19 restaurants and 2,000 employees without saying yes a lot. It's that quality, that openness, that adventurous spirit that's shown both myself and Rob many great adventures. The newest adventure is a restaurant in LA. And right on the heels of our tumultuous year, we were both there, poised to explore a new frontier. We had a business dinner, and we were walking back to the hotel. We found ourselves outside the legendary Comedy Store late and looked up at that night's show. The bill, get this: Judd Apatow, Sebastian Maniscalco, Dave Attell, Whitney Cummings, and Jeff Ross, the king of the roast. Stacked. We stopped and went in. The show was sold out, but after some slick maneuvering by my slick business partner, Rob, we snuck in the main room, and within 15 seconds of sitting down, Jeff Ross asked for a volunteer. Allowing Jeff Ross to roast you is the comedy equivalent of letting Mike Tyson punch you. But still, my hand went up. You, sir, come on up. I went up to the stage and prepared to be obliterated. Next thing I know, Jeff Ross is telling me that I look like John Hamm, if John Hamm's mom drank during her pregnancy. And I'm laughing, and it's amazing, and I'm so glad I raised my hand, and I realize my life is a version of Jim Carrey and Yes Man. I keep raising it because I want to know what's behind door number 2. Sometimes it gets you Bobcat, sometimes it gets you 19 restaurants, sometimes it gets you speaking at Lincoln Center, sometimes it gets you Jeff Ross asking if you're aware you have Al Pacino's haircut from Serpico. And sometimes it puts you and your team in a hole. You know, failure of any sort, in this case, the failure to figure out how to restore ourselves as we went through this arduous year does leave you the clues behind on how you veered off path. You just have to look hard enough and with the right set of eyes. This whole time, for both the company and myself, I was just convinced we'd taken on too much, that it couldn't possibly be anything else. But I wasn't being a good enough detective. I've written several speeches over the years, but never one that I was writing while I lived it, while I was still figuring it out. I started writing this speech in November and was still making changes a few nights ago. Like a good documentary that's filmed over the course of months or years, I was hoping to have some singular moment that wrapped it all up neatly, like some chance meeting with Barack Obama where he said, Kevin, I was the President of the United States for 8 years. I know the difficulties of which you speak. Unfortunately, I've learned the secret of happiness in the face of hardship. Sit down, let me share it with you. Kind of ballsy to do a Barack Obama impression when Seth Meyers and Michael Che are on the same bill, but I said, tell with it. That would have been amazing if that had happened, but it did not. It wasn't some grand statement by a grand statesman at all, but a question a very smart person posed that actually led me to the answers I was looking for. Kevin, do you regret opening any of the restaurants last year? Valid question, and one that I hadn't even thought of, but my answer was an emphatic no. I love those restaurants. But curious, I also asked this to my team, and to a person the answer was no. And then I asked my team another question. If we got to redo 2017, could we do it without destroying ourselves? And the entire team said definitely yes. So where did it go wrong? We sat and we brainstormed, and we were able to trace back months of pain, stress, and countless hours of unnecessary work to a connected group of 3 bad decisions. 3 bad decisions we perceived to be a shortcut. Not a shortcut of quality product or quality design or education, but a shortcut in decision making. The right answer for us had always been a distillation process where many opinions are boiled down to find the right answer. We always as a company understood the power of collective intelligence. But in 2017, just getting the team in one room to make a decision seemed too burdensome. We had 3 leadership positions at one restaurant that were not unanimous choices by the exec team. Normally, such a divided vote would always result in keep looking. But in this year, in that chaos, in that thin labor market, we chose to hire them and cross it off the list. It was a shortcut, and that one decision was truly the straw that broke the camel's back. When we eventually found the right leadership, it improved all our lives. As it turns out, this brainstorming session brought to light how inefficient we were in so many areas. We were dribbling with our heads down and running into each other. And everything we tried to shortcut ended up being the long way around. Shortcuts don't lead to restoration. It's a gateway drug that'll lead you to the other harder shortcuts, heroin-like shortcuts. It's these type of shortcuts that cost you time, but efficiency is what gives you time back. And this is the key to restoration, buying time back. It's a study every person in every company needs to do in their own lives. How many hours did I spend last year reading and then deleting emails that I was unnecessarily CC'd on? Safe estimate for me is 40 hours. How many meetings did I sit through where I ultimately learned nothing from or provided any impact and only went because I was invited or felt some pull of duty to attend? Safe estimate is 60. That's 100 combined hours that should have been used to restore my soul. Our ambition was not the problem. That was part of what made us who we are, part of how we lit our fire on a daily basis. It was about the way we were mentally reacting to the chaos when it occurs, the way we were inefficiently game planning that overburdened certain people, and the way we were measuring decisions in 2017 based on how fast we made them, not how much we were vetting them. We had a company retreat in January. We broke bread, maneuvered our way through an escape game, ate caviar and drank champagne, listened to Rick Bayless wax poetic about balance and motivation. But most importantly, we just talked. We talked about where we've been, where we are, and most importantly, where we want to be. We looked at each other's workloads and reassigned tasks to fresh eyes. We talked about mental health, about staying in the moment. We emphasized the importance of balancing the meetings that can lean towards the negative with positive meetings that focus on the rewarding of people that are killing it. And we made a pact to have fun again. I mean, the greatest times of my life have happened in this business. And if we haven't learned enough by now to enjoy the process, then we need to go back to the drawing board because we're doing it wrong. I'm happy to say these shifts have changed the atmosphere, and the Boca Group forecast is mostly sunny. And even though the weather in the restaurant business is bound to change at any moment, much like Chicago, it's our newly found internal sunshine that'll keep us dry. As for me personally, my path to enlightenment was a little more winding. Coming to the realization that no matter how fortunate you are, and I'm incredibly grateful for what I have, depression doesn't discriminate. And once you're okay with telling people that you're struggling, it's the first step in starting to feel better. I often found myself in a precarious mental state in 2017. I was either haunted by something that had already happened or was worrying about something that had yet to occur. I lost out on thousands of great moments because I was never in the moment. This year's all about present moment experiencing. And when you can step outside yourself holding on to time, how you experience each moment changes immensely. And thanks to some changes recently, I have more moments to spend wisely. I bought back 10 hours this year in a car that I used to spend driving back and forth when I moved closer to the restaurants. I found a lot of good things to replace it with. I spent an hour a week with a great therapist, found myself on a yoga mat more and my phone less. Meditation's a must in the morning, and I'm getting better at doing before I go to bed. I plan my days more strategically and weaved into my schedule are restorative things that I know will fuel some of the more arduous pursuits. We're still raising our hands because we love it, but raising the stuff that we know will fill our soul and hopefully fills the soul of the people that we work with. The fact is, 25 years after my first restaurant, I'm still growing up. I feel like I've learned more at 47 than I did at 17. Maybe this year was the universe's way of forcing us to evolve as a company and forcing me to evolve as a human being. All I know for me is the fog has begun to lift, and I'm no longer annoyed by Will's energy. I'm inspired by it. I recommend to everyone here to take the Proust questionnaire. Proust believed by filling this out, you'd reveal your true nature. It's filled with deep questions like, what is your idea of perfect happiness? What living person do you most despise? Hint, for me, he's orange tinted. Who is the greatest love of your life? And what is your most treasured possession? I fill one out every few years, and the answers often change. One answer that doesn't. What living person do you most admire? My answer, the general manager of the Wendy's in Carlinville, Illinois in 1997. I was driving, I tell this story at every opening we do. I was driving from Springfield, Illinois to St. Louis to look at a restaurant in the winter of 1997. A chef friend and I peeled off to grab a quick burger at Wendy's in Carlinville, Illinois. So we walk in, and a woman's perched at the front of the restaurant just to greet guests. Gentlemen, welcome to Wendy's. I'd never seen a maitre d' at a fast food restaurant before. So naturally, I was surprised. I said hello and then entered the line. And then the cashier proceeded to tell me in great compelling detail about their new spicy chicken sandwich like he was working at a 4-star restaurant. I ordered that spicy chicken sandwich and a water. My friend got the super bar. Wendy's used to have a bar with pasta and salad. The woman who was the greeter was also making sure that the pasta bar stayed immaculate, and at one point came by and she refilled our waters with a pitcher. It was at this point I turned to my friend Scott and said, "What the hell's going on?" My chef friend then asked if we were dining at a Michelin-starred Wendy's. I told him I did not think that existed. It inspired a discussion of how amazing this GM of this restaurant must be. And so we asked for the manager. He came out in a perfect Windsor knot and his Wendy's tie. And he said, "Gentlemen, how can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I just want to tell you, you have an amazingly well-run place. It's the best fast food restaurant I've ever dined at." And he said, "Well, as you can see, we're very proud of it." On the wall was a plaque. They were the #1 rated Wendy's in the United States. This guy was given the same Wendy's menu, the same Wendy's design, and was able to mine greatness out of it and even something unique out of it. There's so many lessons that I'm trying to convey when I tell that story. Greatness can be found in unusual places. Incredible leadership can move mountains. It goes on and on. But really, I'm just trying to light everyone's fire and light my own too. And I've never had a better understanding than right now of how important my fire being lit translates to my own authenticity, which is so important because I'm from the Midwest, and Midwesterners have a really good bullshit detector. And for most of our guests, more important than perfection, our guests want us to be real. And I can only be authentic and inspirational and restorative if I take the time and buy back the time to restore myself. I think we all know the basic recipe for our own happiness. And if the universe is constructed in a way that every day was a perfect day, 8 hours sleep, find myself challenged, meetings with people that inspire me, 1 hour to sweat and test myself physically, immersed in laughter and love, able to avoid all conflict, some pocket where I have 20 minutes to myself alone in thought, make love with my wife in a hammock, I don't know. If that day was my everyday, this pursuit would be easy, but we all know the world doesn't work that way, that we can't control everything. And we all have to find a way to navigate the inevitable landmines that stand in the way of these perfect days. But what I've figured out, this new 2018 version of me, is this is not a passive pursuit. It's an active one, man. And I have a happiness agenda, and it takes priority. So the things I can control, mindfulness, diet, exercise, attitude, and who I choose to spend my time with, it's these things that take priority over all others. So when I do raise my hand, I'm armed with the mental fortitude to make sure that my ambition doesn't undermine the clarity that got me all these killer opportunities in the first place. I was conversing with a gentleman recently whose family's owned a restaurant since 1948. At one point, we were interrupted by another man who walked up and knew him, hand extended, and said, "Oh man, Wally, man, that night that we hung out after the Super Bowl, that might have been the best night of my life." Wally embraced him tightly, told him how great it was to see him, kissed him on both cheeks, told him he loved him, and the man moved on. Wally turned to me. 2 things, he said. 1, I have no idea who that man is. 2, if the best night of my life is a night I can't even remember, then my life must be pretty good. It's true, right? We get a ringside seat to first dates, first love, bucket list dinners that she said yes, and people having the greatest nights of their lives. Our seat's the best seat in the house. And if you're living in the moment, you can just catch some of that restorative energy. It's just floating in the air waiting for you to grab it. This crowd today is composed of some of the best, brightest, and most ambitious people in the restaurant industry. There are literally hundreds of unopened restaurants that right now only exist in all your minds. Many of these projects, these ambitions, will eventually lead us to moments where we paint ourselves in a corner. That's going to happen. In fact, some of you sitting out here today might be in the eye of the hurricane right now, or just in dire need of having your fire relit. Remember that nothing's more important than the health of your own mind and your own soul. And when you find yourself truly restored, your own enlightenment will be more powerful than anything you might face. Be happy, be well. Thank you.